A single faith closed its doors to outsiders 1,000 years ago. This is the story of the Druze, a religion so secretive its deepest truths are known only to a chosen few within its own community. By the end of this journey, you will understand the hidden history and guarded beliefs that have allowed this enigmatic tradition to survive for a full millennium against all odds. We will explore why conversion was forbidden centuries ago and what profound mysteries are protected by its spiritual elite. What does it truly mean for a belief system to live in the shadows? Our story begins not in remote mountains, but in the heart of a glittering empire. In the early 11th century, the Fatimid Caliphate ruled from Cairo, a center of immense power and learning. This was a Shia Muslim dynasty, specifically of the Ismaili branch, which held a deep reverence for enlightened spiritual leaders known as imams. It was within this sophisticated, theological environment that a seismic shift quietly began to stir. The catalyst was the sixth Fatimid Caliph, a man whose name still echoes with mystery, al-Hakim bi-Amr Allah. His reign was anything but ordinary. He issued decrees that bewildered his subjects, from banning certain foods to commanding new patterns of trade. He walked the streets of Cairo in disguise, listening to the concerns of the common people directly. To his inner circle of followers, these were not the actions of a madman, but of something far more profound. They began to see in al-Hakim a transcendent, divine light, a manifestation of God on earth. This belief was not for the masses. It was a secret revelation, a call meant only for the spiritually prepared. The man who gave structure to this revolutionary idea was not the caliph himself, but his most devoted companion, Hamza ibn Ali. Think of Hamza as the architect, taking the raw, controversial concept of al-Hakim's divinity and building a complete theological system around it. He declared that this was the final, ultimate revelation of God, and he began a secret mission, a dawah, to invite a select few into this new understanding. This was not about building a large public religion. It was about gathering a small, faithful community who could recognize the truth hidden in plain sight within the figure of a controversial ruler. The call went out quietly, a whisper in the corridors of power and among certain learned circles. Those who answered it were stepping into a mystery that would, within a single generation, close its doors to the world forever. The gate swung shut with a finality rarely seen in the history of faith. In the year 1043, just 23 years after Hamza ibn Ali first issued his secret call, the Druze dawah was officially and permanently closed. No more invitations would be sent. The community of believers was now complete. This was not an act of retreat, but of profound theological conviction. The truth, they believed, had been fully revealed to all who were spiritually prepared to receive it. Those who had answered the call within that sacred window formed a complete and perfect assembly, a congregation sealed for eternity. Anyone born after that date, anywhere in the world, was simply outside the circle. The door was not just locked, it was removed from the wall entirely. Imagine the staggering weight of that decision. From that moment forward, the only way into the Druze faith was to be born into it. This created a religious community unlike almost any other, defined not by open invitation, but by a closed lineage. The implications of this act echo through the centuries. It became the ultimate safeguard, a brilliant and drastic strategy for survival. In a world often torn apart by religious conquest and conversion, the Druze removed themselves from the competition entirely. They could not be targeted for forced conversion because they would not accept converts. Their beliefs could not be diluted or distorted by newcomers because there were no newcomers. This self-contained system turned the community inward, fostering an incredible strength of identity and an impenetrable culture of secrecy. To be Druze was to be part of a family in the most literal, spiritual sense. a family that had received a singular truth and was now entrusted with its protection across generations. The survival of their mysteries for a full millennium is a direct result of that fateful decision to close the gate. It transformed them into a living relic, a spiritual island in the stream of time. But what exactly were these secrets the community was sworn to protect? The heart of Druze belief is a concept called Tawhid, often translated as divine unity. While Islam itself is fiercely monotheistic, the Druze understanding of Tawhid pushes into realms of profound mystery. For them, God is utterly transcendent, beyond all human comprehension, description, or even direct relationship. This is not a God you can pray to in a conventional sense, because that would imply a separation between the creation and the Creator. So how does such a distant, infinite principle interact with the world? This is where a beautiful and complex cosmology comes into play. The Druze believe in 5 supreme cosmic principles, sometimes called emanations, which act as the bridge between the unknowable divine and our reality. Think of them not as separate gods, but as facets of the divine intellect, the first and purest expressions of God's will. In their theology, these principles became incarnate in historical figures at the dawn of the faith. The universal mind was embodied in Hamza ibn Ali, the architect of the religion. The universal soul manifested in Ismail al-Tamimi, another early leader. The Word, the right wing, and the left wing completed this holy pentat. This system provides a framework for creation and divine communication without compromising the absolute, overwhelming oneness of God. This leads directly to another pillar of Druze spirituality, one that makes their closed community make profound sense: the belief in reincarnation, or takamus. Unlike traditions that speak of heavens, hells, or long waits between lives, the Druze believe the soul transmigrates immediately. When a Druze person passes away, their soul is reborn instantly into the body of a newborn Druze child. This creates a breathtakingly closed spiritual ecosystem. There is no entry from the outside and no exit to somewhere else. Every soul within the community has always been within the community, cycling through lifetimes, learning, progressing, or sometimes stagnating across centuries. Your neighbor might carry the soul of a wise elder from 5 generations past. A newborn could be the return of a beloved ancestor. This belief forges an unimaginably deep bond. It means the community is not just a group of people living together now. It is an eternal family of souls, perpetually reunited. Your duty, your spiritual progress, is tied to the collective. There is no concept of converting into this cycle, because you are either already a part of its eternal rhythm or you are not. The closed door of 1043 sealed this cycle in place, making the Druze people the literal custodians of these migrating souls, lifetime after lifetime, in a sacred trust that has lasted for 1,000 years. This intricate cosmology of reincarnation and divine unity is not just philosophy. It demands a way of life. To live as a Druze is to follow a clear and practical ethical path, known as the 7 precepts or commandments. These are not abstract ideals, but the daily blueprint for maintaining that sacred, closed community across centuries. The first commandment is truthfulness in speech. For a people guarding profound secrets, honesty within the community is the bedrock of all trust. Lying shatters the spiritual bond that holds them together. The second commandment calls for mutual protection and aid. Every Druze is a guardian of every other Druze. This duty of care creates an unbreakable social safety net, a promise that no member of the community will ever be abandoned. The third is the renunciation of other religions and creeds. This reinforces the theological finality of their own revelation and ensures no spiritual dilution from outside influences. Closely linked is the fourth, dissociation from non-believers and from evil. This does not necessarily mean hostility, but it does mandate a clear boundary. It is a call for spiritual and social separation to preserve the community's purity and cohesion. The fifth commandment is the recognition of the divine unity, or Tawhid, in every age. This reminds them that the one truth they follow is eternal and unchanging, even as the world outside transforms. The sixth is contentment with God's actions. It teaches acceptance of life's circumstances as part of a divine plan, fostering resilience and inner peace. The final precept is submission to God's will, the ultimate act of trust in the cosmic order they believe in. Together, these 7 principles forge a powerful dual identity. Internally, they cultivate a sabiyya, a term meaning intense communal solidarity. It is the glue that turns a group of people into a single, resilient organism. Externally, the commandments enforce a clear separation from the wider world. This is not a life of isolation for its own sake, but a conscious, disciplined strategy for survival. By binding themselves so completely to one another through truth, aid, and shared belief, while maintaining a respectful distance from others, the Druze built a cultural fortress. Their morality is their armor, and their community is their sanctuary, allowing them to navigate 1,000 years of history without losing the essence of who they are. This internal fortress of faith has a hidden chamber, accessible only to a select few. Within the seemingly unified Druze community lies a profound spiritual hierarchy, a division between those who know the deepest secrets and those who follow the outward path. They are known as the Uqqal, the knowledgeable, and the Juhal, the ignorant. These terms carry no insult, only a clear description of spiritual access. The Juhal, who form the majority of the community, live by the 7 precepts we discussed. They are faithful, ethical, and deeply committed to Druze identity and solidarity, but they are not taught the esoteric core of the religion. Theirs is the path of righteous action and communal loyalty, the strong outer walls that protect the inner sanctum. The true guardians of that sanctum are the Uqqal. This initiated religious elite holds the ultimate trust, the sacred and secret texts known as the Epistles of Wisdom, or Rasail al-Hikmah. These are not books you can find in a library or online. They are handwritten manuscripts kept under strict guard, containing the mystical interpretations of Tawhid, the details of the cosmic principles, and the full depth of Druze theology. To be Uqqal is to carry the living heart of the tradition within you. The path to joining their ranks is one of lifelong dedication. It begins with a solemn vow taken before a council of elders, usually after the age of 40, when a person is deemed to have gained maturity and stability. This vow is a commitment to a higher level of moral and spiritual conduct, to a life of prayer, meditation, and study. An initiate, now called an Uqqal for a man or an Uqqala for a woman, must embody wisdom, discretion, and absolute integrity. Their outward appearance often reflects this inner transformation. Many male Uqqal distinguish themselves by wearing a white turban or a specific type of cap, and dark, modest clothing. For women of the Uqqal, the traditional long, dark dress and white headscarf are not just cultural attire, but a visible sign of their spiritual station and modesty. This visible distinction serves as a constant, quiet reminder of the layered reality within the community. It is a system where the strength of the many supports the profound knowledge of the few, and where the secrets of 1,000 years are preserved not in books on a shelf, but in the minds and hearts of a living, disciplined elite. These sacred texts are known as the Epistles of Wisdom, and they are the ultimate treasure of the Druze tradition. Unlike the Bible or the Quran, you cannot purchase a copy or find a translation in a bookstore. The Rasail al-Hikmah are not a single, bound volume, but a living collection of over 100 epistles, letters, and philosophical treatises. They were composed in the faith's formative years, primarily by the founding architect Hamza ibn Ali, and his close companions. Their physical existence is a closely guarded secret. You will not find them on open shelves. They are stored in special closed cabinets called kiswin, housed within the quiet, private meeting halls known as the khalwa or majlis. Access to these rooms is strictly controlled, and access to the texts themselves is a privilege granted only to the most seasoned and trustworthy members of the Uqqal, the spiritual elite. To even lay eyes upon the manuscripts is to be admitted into the innermost circle of a 1,000-year-old mystery. So what is written in these forbidden pages? The content is described as the esoteric heart of the faith, the deep interpretation behind the outward practices. Scholars who have managed to study fragments describe a rich tapestry of thought. The epistles weave together strands of Neoplatonic philosophy, with its focus on divine emanations and the journey of the soul back to its source. They contain Gnostic themes, exploring the idea of hidden spiritual knowledge, or gnosis, as the key to liberation. And they are deeply rooted in the sophisticated theological language of their time, particularly Ismaili thought, which itself was known for its allegorical readings of Scripture. In essence, these texts are the master key. They take the public principles of Tawhid and reincarnation and unlock their deepest, most mystical meanings. They explain the nature of the cosmic principles, the intricate journey of the soul, and the hidden symbolism within religious narratives. This is not doctrine for the masses. It is a rigorous philosophical and spiritual system meant for those who have dedicated their lives to understanding. The Epistles of Wisdom transform the Druze faith from a simple set of community rules into a profound and complex universe of thought, a universe that has remained hermetically sealed, its full contours known only to a handful of guardians in each generation. This profound knowledge finds its home in a space of equal subtlety and seclusion. The Druze house of worship is called the khalwa, or sometimes a majlis, a word meaning a place of sitting or gathering. You would not recognize it as a traditional temple or mosque. There are no grand domes, towering minarets, or ornate facades. More often than not, a khalwa is a simple, unadorned stone building, sometimes looking like a large village house. It is frequently located away from bustling centers, tucked into a secluded valley, or perched high on a mountaintop, its very position speaking to the inward, contemplative nature of the faith it serves. There is no sign announcing its purpose, no public call to prayer echoing from its door. Its modesty is its cloak, a perfect reflection of a tradition that treasures hidden wisdom over public display. Inside, the atmosphere is one of quiet solemnity. The space is typically divided, with a main hall for the gatherings of the initiated, the Uqqal, and often a separate area where the broader community, the Juhal, can come for counsel or to observe certain commemorations. The true heart of the khalwa, however, beats on Thursday nights. This is when the Uqqal gather in their most sacred weekly ritual. There is no clergy leading a formal service, no prescribed liturgy recited in unison. Instead, men and women of the Uqqal sit together in a circle, a physical representation of their spiritual equality before the divine truth. The evening is dedicated to prayer, deep meditation, and most importantly, the study of the Epistles of Wisdom. A respected elder, chosen for their knowledge and piety, will read aloud from the handwritten manuscripts, and the group will engage in discussion, interpreting the texts and applying their lessons to daily life and spiritual progress. It is a living conversation with a 1,000-year-old mystery. The absence of public ritual, of a professional priesthood, or a rigid hierarchy is absolutely central. It underscores a powerful principle that in Druze spirituality, divine connection and understanding are not mediated through an institutional church, but are cultivated personally, in secret, within the heart of a prepared individual and the trusted circle of their community. The khalwa is not a theater for performance. but a sanctuary for revelation, where the only audience is the divine itself, and the only sound is the quiet turning of a sacred page. The quiet study within the Khalwa stood in stark contrast to the violent storms of history raging outside. To survive for 1,000 years, the Druze did not just guard spiritual secrets, they mastered the art of earthly survival against overwhelming odds. Their journey truly began with a crisis of faith. In the year 1021, the central figure of their revelation, the Caliph al-Hakim bi-Amr Allah, simply vanished during a nightly walk in the hills outside Cairo. His body was never found. To the wider world, it was a mystery, perhaps an assassination. To the early Druze, it was the ultimate test. They interpreted his disappearance not as an end, but as a concealment, a period of divine withdrawal known as the occultation. This left them leaderless and exposed, branded as heretics by the mainstream Islamic powers, who now sought to eradicate their movement. The faithful few had to flee or face annihilation. Their response was both practical and symbolic. They retreated into the mountains, the rugged, defensible highlands of Mount Lebanon, and later the vast, volcanic plateau of the Horn, which would become known as Jabal al-Druze, became their fortress. These were not just places to live, they were natural citadels. From these rocky perches, they could see enemies coming from miles away, and the treacherous terrain favored the defender. Mountain life further reinforced their communal bonds and self-reliance, turning geographical isolation into a cultural strength. Their first major test from the West came with the Crusades. When European knights carved out their kingdoms along the coast, they found the Druze already entrenched in the mountains. The Crusaders, focused on the coastal cities and Jerusalem, often saw these mountain dwellers as just another local group, neither fully Muslim nor Christian. The Druze, masters of realpolitik, engaged in a delicate dance. They occasionally formed tactical alliances with Crusader states against common enemies, while fiercely defending their own autonomy. They were never conquered by the Crusaders, a testament to their martial skill and the impregnability of their homeland. As the Crusader era faded, new powers rose from the east. The Druze navigated the rise and fall of empires, from the Ayyubids to the Mamluks, often by pledging a nominal, distant loyalty to the Sultan in exchange for being left alone to manage their own affairs. Their reputation as fierce warriors made them useful, but their secret beliefs always kept them at arm's length from the central power. This balancing act reached its peak under the vast, bureaucratic Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans, ruling from Constantinople, preferred indirect rule in difficult territories. They empowered local leaders to collect taxes and maintain order. The Druze, organized around powerful feudal families, excelled within this system. The Man family, and later the Shihab family, became semi-autonomous princes over Mount Lebanon for centuries. They commanded Druze fighting forces, negotiated with Ottoman governors, and created a de facto Druze statelet within the empire. This era was not always peaceful. It included brutal internal feuds and conflicts with neighboring groups, but it provided a stable framework for the community to thrive. Throughout all of this, from Crusader swords to Ottoman decrees, their secrecy was their ultimate shield. By presenting an opaque, unified front to the outside world, they gave rulers no religious cause to interfere. By binding themselves internally with absolute loyalty and the 7 precepts, they ensured no internal fracture could be exploited by outsiders. Their history is not a chronicle of empires, but the story of a small, stubborn community using wisdom, wariness, and the will to remain separate, writing their own survival into the rocky slopes of their mountain homes. The mountains offered protection, but the 20th century brought a new kind of storm. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire fractured the Middle East into modern nation-states, drawing new borders directly through the ancient Druze heartland. Overnight, the community found itself divided. a single people living under 4 different flags in Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and Jordan. Each country presented a unique political puzzle, forcing the Druze to navigate the treacherous waters of modern nationalism while holding fast to their transcendent religious identity. In Lebanon, they became a key pillar of the delicate sectarian system, officially recognized as one of the country's 18 confessional groups. The Druze hold reserved seats in parliament and have wielded significant political power, often through influential feudal-turned political families. Their compact mountain strongholds provided a base of power, but life in Lebanon's volatile political arena meant constant balancing, forming shifting alliances with other communities to protect their interests in a country where political survival is a high-stakes game. The Syrian conflict placed them in an impossibly difficult position. Concentrated in the rugged Swader region, Syrian Druze found themselves caught between a repressive government, extremist rebel factions, and international powers. Their primary strategy was one of defensive neutrality, a desperate attempt to shield their communities from the devastating war on all sides. They formed local militias not to conquer territory, but to protect their villages, demonstrating that their ancient instinct for communal survival remained their highest political directive. Perhaps the most unique modern arrangement emerged in Israel. Here, the Druze forged a distinctive compact with the state. Unlike their Arab, Israeli, or Palestinian counterparts, Druze citizens are subject to the military draft, and they serve in significant numbers, often in combat units. This military service is a point of great pride and a cornerstone of their civic identity. In return, they have maintained a large degree of religious and cultural autonomy, with their own court system for personal status laws, like marriage and inheritance. This relationship is often described as a blood covenant, symbolizing loyalty and mutual respect, yet it is not without its deep tensions. As a community that defines itself by faith, not ethnicity, their Israeli national identity exists in a complex, sometimes uneasy, dialogue with their Arab culture and language. The rise of modern nationalism in all these countries presents a profound challenge to a people whose ultimate allegiance is to a timeless spiritual truth. They are masters of pragmatic adaptation, engaging with parliaments and armies to secure their future, while the Thursday night gatherings in the secluded Khalwa continue as they have for centuries, a silent reminder that their true citizenship lies elsewhere. This dual existence, as patriotic citizens of earthly nations and eternal custodians of a heavenly secret, is the defining drama of the modern Druze. Amidst all this secrecy, one symbol speaks openly: the Druze flag and the banners within their quiet places of worship are often emblazoned with a striking 5-pointed star. Each point is a distinct color: green, red, yellow, blue, and white, arranged in a vibrant circle. This is far more than a simple emblem. It is a visual key to their entire cosmic understanding. The star is a direct representation of the 5 supreme cosmic principles, the divine emanations that bridge the infinite, unknowable God with the created world. Each colored point corresponds to one of these holy intelligences and to the historical figure who embodied it at the dawn of the faith. The green point symbolizes the universal mind, the first and greatest emanation, which was incarnate in Hamza ibn Ali, the architect of the religion. Red represents the universal soul, embodied in Ismail al-Tamimi. Yellow stands for the Word, manifested in Muhammad al-Darazi, whose name, interestingly, would later be given to the faith itself, though his role within it is complex. Blue signifies the precedent, and white the follower, completing the sacred pentat. Together, these 5 are not separate gods, but the perfect, unified expression of the divine will, the means through which an utterly transcendent God interacts with creation. When a Druze person looks upon this star, they see a map of their theology, the star itself, as a single, unified geometric shape, perfectly embodies the core principle of Tawhid, divine unity. The 5 distinct colors exist harmoniously within one form, just as the 5 cosmic principles exist within the oneness of God. It is a symbol of integration, where multiplicity finds its source and meaning in a singular truth. You will see this star on their official flag, a bold declaration of identity to the outside world. More intimately, it is woven into the fabric of life inside the Khalwa, perhaps embroidered on a cloth covering the sacred cabinet that holds the Epistles of Wisdom, or painted quietly on a wall. In a tradition so guarded with words, this symbol becomes a silent sermon. It reminds the initiated of the intricate layers of their belief, and it presents to the uninitiated a beautiful, mysterious door, hinting at depths they are not permitted to enter. The Druze star is a perfect paradox, a public display that guards a profound secret, a colorful guide to a truth that remains forever just out of sight. Such profound secrecy inevitably gives rise to whispers and shadows. Over the centuries, the closed nature of the Druze faith has led to a thicket of myths and misconceptions, often born from the simple human need to explain what is deliberately kept hidden. One of the most persistent misunderstandings is the idea that the Druze are merely an Islamic sect, a branch that could, theoretically, rejoin the trunk of mainstream Islam. This is a fundamental error in understanding their own self-perception. While their historical roots are undeniably in the Ismaili theological world of 11th century Cairo, and they revere figures like Ali and Muhammad as prophets in a long line of divine messengers, they believe their own revelation represents the final chapter. In their view, the faith established by Hamza ibn Ali under al-Hakim is not another version of Islam. It is the completion and culmination of God's message to humanity. The door of prophecy is closed, and with it, the era of new religious laws. They see themselves as living within that final, perfected truth. This is why conversion is impossible, not out of exclusivity, but because they believe the time for choosing a new path has passed. The call was made, a specific community answered, and that sacred window is now sealed for all time. Another common distortion swirls around the figure of al-Hakim bi-Amr Allah. Outsiders, looking at the historical devotion to this controversial caliph, sometimes leap to the conclusion that Druze worship him as a god. The reality is far more nuanced and aligns with their complex theology. They do not worship al-Hakim as God incarnate. Instead, they see him as the perfect vessel, the human manifestation of the first and greatest cosmic emanation, the universal mind. Recall the 5-colored star, where green represents the mind. In their belief, that supreme divine intellect, which is an aspect of God's will but not God's unknowable essence, became fully present in the world through the person of al-Hakim. He was the locus of divine light, not the source of the light itself. His mysterious disappearance was not a death, but a concealment, a withdrawal of that manifest presence from the physical world. So the reverence is for the divine principle he made visible, not for the mortal man as a separate deity. This is a critical distinction that separates their belief from simple idolatry and roots it firmly in their sophisticated emanationist cosmology. Then there are the darker, more sensational myths, often propagated in times of political tension. You might hear tales of a secret blood oath or initiation rites involving shocking acts. These stories are fabrications, born from fear of the unknown. The true oath taken by the Uqqal, the spiritual initiates, is a solemn vow of ethical conduct, secrecy, and dedication to study. It is a promise made with words, not rituals with physical symbols. The real binding force of the community is not a mythical oath, but the lived reality of the 7 precepts, that unwavering ethical code of truthfulness, mutual protection, and submission to divine will. What outsiders perceive as mysterious, clannish loyalty is simply the outward expression of this centuries-old covenant. When Druze communities rally to support one another with astonishing speed and solidarity, they are not enacting a secret pact. They are living the commandment to protect every member of their eternal family of souls. The mystery, then, is not in hidden rituals, but in the sheer, enduring power of a promise kept across 1,000 years. In a world of constant change, their greatest secret may be the simple, profound strength found in unwavering unity. This sanctioned secrecy has a name, a principle that has been both a shield and a source of profound misunderstanding. It is called taqiyya, often discussed in the context of Shia Islam. The concept of religiously permitted dissimulation is woven into the very fabric of Druze survival. At its core, taqiyya is the theological permission to conceal one's true faith when faced with persecution, oppression, or mortal danger. It is not considered lying in a sinful sense, but a prudent and necessary act of self-preservation, a way to protect the community from annihilation. For the Druze, this ancient doctrine fused perfectly with their already closed and secretive nature, creating a powerful strategy for navigating a hostile world. Imagine the reality for a Druze family living for centuries in a village under Ottoman rule, where the official religion was Sunni Islam. Publicly, they might attend the local mosque on Fridays, observe the fast of Ramadan, or use Islamic phrases in daily conversation. Their dress, their public ceremonies, even their recorded legal documents, might all conform to the dominant faith of the land. To an outside observer, they were simply another group of Muslims. But behind closed doors, within the walls of their homes and the seclusion of their khalwa, they lived an entirely different spiritual reality. They maintained their belief in Tawhid, studied the Epistles of Wisdom, and gathered for their Thursday night meditations. This outward conformity was not hypocrisy. It was a sacred disguise, a life-saving performance enacted for the safety of their eternal souls and their community. The practice extended beyond just religious ritual. In regions with Christian majorities, Druze might adopt Christian customs in public, attending church festivals, or using Christian oaths in court, all while holding fast to their hidden beliefs. This ability to blend in, to present a malleable external identity, became a cornerstone of their resilience. It meant they rarely presented a clear religious target for zealous rulers or invading armies. When combined with the permanent closure of their faith to outsiders, taqiyya created an almost impenetrable double veil. Not only would they never explain their beliefs to you, but they might also actively pretend to share yours. This deepened the mystery surrounding them to extraordinary levels, fueling the rumors and myths we discussed earlier. To outsiders, it could seem deceptive or distrustful. But from within the community, it was the ultimate act of loyalty, a collective vow of silence taken for the sake of a truth too precious to be destroyed. Taqiyya was the practical application of their commandment to dissociate from non-believers and evil. It was how they drew that necessary boundary in a world that did not understand them. It allowed the inner light of their faith to burn in secret century after century, while the outer shell adapted to whatever storm was passing by. Yet behind this ancient practice of concealment lies a community where women hold a position of profound and often surprising authority. To understand the Druze is to discard many common assumptions about traditional societies, for within their guarded world, women are not merely participants, they are pillars of spiritual power. This is most clearly seen in the path of the Uqqal, the initiated religious elite. Unlike many faiths that restrict such roles to men, Druze theology explicitly opens this highest spiritual station to women on equal footing. A woman who takes the solemn vow of initiation after years of demonstrated piety and wisdom becomes an Aquila, or more respectfully, a Sheikha. She is not a secondary member of the gathering. She sits in the circle alongside her male counterparts during the Thursday night meetings in the Khalwa. There, she studies the same secret epistles of wisdom, contributes to theological discussions, and engages in deep meditation. In fact, a long-standing belief within the tradition holds that women possess a natural spiritual purity, a clarity that can make them especially receptive to divine truth. This is not just theory, it is lived reality. The respect accorded to a sheikha is immense. Her counsel sought on matters of faith, ethics, and even community disputes. She is a living guardian of the mystery, her mind a trusted vessel for the same sacred knowledge preserved by the most learned men. This spiritual status is mirrored in a distinctive and meaningful tradition of dress. For an initiated Druze woman, her clothing is a silent proclamation of her inner commitment. The most recognizable element is the mandil, a pure white headscarf worn tightly around the head and chin. The white symbolizes light, purity, and the enlightened intellect she cultivates through her spiritual practice. It is a public badge of her achieved status as one of the Uqqal, visible to all within her community. Beneath this, she typically wears a long, modest black skirt or dress, often over loose trousers known as a shirwal. The black represents humility, the renunciation of vanity, and the solemnity of her vow. This attire is not imposed, but chosen, a personal and proud embrace of her role. It sets her apart, signaling that she has moved from the general community of the faithful into the inner circle of the knowledgeable. For the observer, it creates a visible map of the community's spiritual hierarchy, where a woman in white and black commands immediate respect as a bearer of ancient wisdom. Beyond the Kalwa, the influence of Druze women is the bedrock of cultural survival. They are the primary transmitters of tradition, the keepers of the flame within the heart of the home. The faith and its intricate customs are passed from mother to child through stories, daily practices, and the subtle teaching of values like honor, hospitality, and communal loyalty. Because the Druze identity is inherited, and because the community is so tightly knit, the maternal line is a sacred channel. A Druze mother does not merely raise a child, she nurtures a future link in an unbroken chain of souls that stretches back 1,000 years. She instills the 7 precepts, teaches the importance of secrecy and solidarity, and prepares the next generation to navigate the dual life of being a citizen of a modern state and a member of an eternal spiritual family. In times of crisis or external threat, it is often the women who become the steadfast anchors, maintaining household rituals, preserving oral histories, and ensuring that the fabric of community life remains intact even when men are absent or endangered. Their strength is quiet, but it is formidable, so while the outside world might see a figure in a white headscarf and perceive only modesty or tradition, within the Druze universe, that same figure represents spiritual authority, ancestral continuity, and the quiet, enduring power that has held a secret faith together across a millennium. The night of his disappearance remains a historical riddle wrapped in theological mystery. In the year 1021, the Fatimid Caliph al-Hakim bi-Amr left his palace for a solitary walk into the Muqattam Hills, the stark limestone cliffs that cradle Cairo. He was accompanied only by a few servants and his favorite donkey. He gave an order for his party to wait, and then he vanished into the darkness. He never returned. Searches found only his donkey and his torn, blood-stained robe. To the wider Islamic world, this was likely the grim conclusion of a turbulent reign, an assassination or an accident kept secret. But for the small, devoted circle that saw in him a divine light, this event was not an end. It was the beginning of the ultimate mystery, the doctrine of the occultation. The Druze believe al-Hakim did not die. They hold that he withdrew from the physical world, entering a state of hiddenness known as Geba. In this belief, he was concealed by God to protect him from his enemies and to test the faith of his followers. This is not seen as a passive absence, but a purposeful withdrawal. He exists in a realm beyond human perception, watching over his faithful community, the Druze. Uncritically, they await his return. At the end of time, when injustice has covered the earth, al-Hakim will reappear as a messianic figure, the Imam of the age. He will return to establish a final, perfect era of justice and truth, fulfilling the divine promise and completing the cosmic cycle that began with his manifestation. This core belief creates a powerful, forward-looking hope, an eschatological anchor for the entire faith. You can hear clear echoes here of Shia Islam, particularly the Twelver belief in the hidden Imam, Muhammad al-Mahdi, who also disappeared and is awaited as a redeemer. This parallel is no accident. It stems from the shared theological soil of early Ismaili thought, which deeply influenced both traditions. For the Druze, however, the occultation is not a distant theological concept. It is the direct, personal fate of the central figure of their revelation. It explains why their dawah closed so soon after his disappearance. The community was now in a state of waiting, preserving the truth for the day of his return. This waiting is active, not passive. It demands the strict maintenance of their secret doctrines and their tight communal bonds, for they must be spiritually prepared and organizationally intact when their hidden Imam makes his triumphant reappearance. Every generation of Druze, then, lives with this dual consciousness, navigating the practical world while holding in their hearts the quiet, certain knowledge that the story is not over, that the most important chapter is still to come. This waiting spans continents now, carried by a people no longer confined to their mountain fortresses. The Druze story today is also a story of global dispersion. From the villages of Lebanon and Syria, waves of migration have carried families across oceans, planting their ancient faith in the soil of entirely new worlds. Significant communities took root in the Americas, particularly in the United States, Canada, and surprisingly, Venezuela. Others settled in Australia and parts of West Africa. This created a profound new test. How do you maintain a closed, secretive religious identity designed for tight-knit villages when you are suddenly living in an open, multicultural metropolis like Detroit, Sydney, or Caracas? The ancient strategy of taqiyya, of blending into the dominant culture, faces a different challenge when the dominant culture is a secular, pluralistic society that celebrates individual choice and public religious expression. The diaspora response has been a masterful act of adaptation. Druze in these new lands often establish vibrant cultural associations. In cities across the United States, for instance, you will find American Druze Society chapters. These are not khalwas, they are community centers. They host festivals celebrating shared heritage with traditional food, music, and dance. They organize youth camps, teaching the next generation about their history and the ethical principles of the 7 precepts. They provide social support networks, helping new immigrants find jobs and housing, echoing that core commandment of mutual protection. Publicly, these associations present a proud ethnic and cultural identity. They engage fully in civic life, with members excelling as doctors, engineers, entrepreneurs, and public servants, embodying the Druze value of contributing to the society they live in. Yet, the deepest religious practices remain intensely private, transferred from the secluded mountain khalwa to the living rooms and basements of suburban homes. The Thursday night gatherings of the Uqqal still happen, but now they might take place in a house in Michigan or a flat in Melbourne, with the same whispered discussions of the Epistles of Wisdom. The most critical mechanism for survival in the diaspora, however, is endogamy, the practice of marrying within the faith. In an open society where intermarriage is common, this tradition becomes the ultimate bulwark. Families place immense importance on finding Druze partners for their children, often relying on a global network of connections to introduce suitable matches from other diaspora communities, or sometimes even from the homeland. This is not merely cultural preference. It is a theological necessity for a faith built on reincarnation within a closed soul cycle. A Druze marrying outside the faith is seen not just as a personal choice, but as a spiritual exit, a breaking of the eternal chain. Modern technology both helps and challenges this delicate balance. The internet and social media have created a global village for the Druze. Cultural associations coordinate worldwide, families stay connected across time zones, and young people can meet potential partners online. But this hyper-connectivity also poses a risk to a culture of secrecy. How do you guard sacred mysteries in an age of digital exposure? The community's answer is a modern form of disciplined silence. While cultural pride is shared openly online, the core tenets of Tawhid, the details of the cosmic principles, and the contents of the epistles remain strictly offline, transmitted only in person, within trusted circles. The diaspora Druze thus lives a carefully curated duality, publicly celebrating a rich heritage while privately guarding an even richer faith, proving that their ancient walls of secrecy can be rebuilt, not from stone, but from commitment, in any corner of the earth. This careful dance of identity has defined their place among the world's great faiths. The Druze relationship with other religions is a study in profound duality, shaped by a core theological conviction. They believe that the major monotheistic religions, Islam and Christianity, contain valid but incomplete truths. These are the exoteric paths, the outer teachings meant for the general public in their own times. The Druze, however, see themselves as the guardians of the esoteric reality, the inner, final truth that completes and fulfills all that came before. This creates a fascinating social posture, one of pragmatic coexistence layered over a fundamental spiritual distance. Historically, this translated into a pattern of shifting alliances based on survival, not shared doctrine. With their Sunni Muslim rulers, particularly during the Ottoman centuries, the relationship was often one of cautious submission. Publicly, they would conform to Islamic customs as part of taqiyya, while privately maintaining their separate beliefs. They were valued as fierce warriors and reliable taxpayers, but their secret faith kept them perpetually at the margins of mainstream Islamic society, viewed with suspicion by religious scholars. With Shia Muslims, particularly the Alawites in Syria, there were sometimes closer geopolitical ties, as both were minority groups with esoteric tendencies living under Sunni-dominated empires. These were alliances of circumstance, not theological brotherhood. The most complex and often tragic relationship has been with the Maronite Christians of Lebanon. For centuries, Druze and Maronite feudal lords ruled the mountains of Lebanon in a delicate balance, sometimes as allies against Ottoman interference, other times as rivals for land and influence. They developed a unique cultural symbiosis in some villages, sharing agricultural practices and even folk traditions. Yet this coexistence was shattered in the middle of the 19th century by a catastrophic civil war, fueled by rising nationalism and outside political manipulation. The violence left deep scars and a legacy of distrust that still echoes in Lebanese politics today. In modern Israel, the Druze have built a distinctive covenant with the Jewish state, one based on military service and civic loyalty, while maintaining their religious separation. This relationship is pragmatic and contractual, demonstrating their ability to form bonds with a non-Abrahamic faith when it ensures communal security. Throughout all these interactions, the theological principle holds: they can respect others as people, cooperate for mutual benefit, and even adopt outward customs for safety, but they never concede spiritual equality. They believe they alone hold the complete picture. This explains why a Druze community can live peacefully for generations beside a Christian village or a Muslim town, engaging in trade and daily life, while never intermarrying or sharing their deepest spiritual gatherings. The distance is not one of hostility, but of a quiet, unshakable certainty that they are the keepers of a finished revelation. Their political alliances, therefore, are never permanent mergers of faith, but temporary convergences of interest, always ready to shift if the winds of survival change direction. This is the ultimate paradox of the Druze in the world. They are among the best neighbors and most loyal citizens, yet in their hearts they remain eternal strangers, guarding a light they believe is for them alone. Within this world of hidden knowledge, the few public ceremonies that do exist are strikingly simple. For the Druze, the grand milestones of life are marked not by elaborate sacraments, but by quiet, dignified acts that reflect their core belief in the eternal journey of the soul. Take marriage, for instance. There is no religious wedding ceremony in the way most would recognize it. Instead, the union is formalized through a civil contract called an act. This is a practical agreement, overseen by a respected community elder, often from the Uqqal, who acts as a witness and guide. The focus is entirely on the mutual consent and understanding of the bride and groom. Vows are exchanged, but they are promises made to each other, centered on partnership, respect, and building a family within the faith. There is no ritualistic blessing of rings, no pronouncement by a priest or imam acting as an intermediary to God. The spiritual significance is understood to be inherent, flowing from the creation of a new Druze home that will nurture the next link in the chain of reincarnating souls. The celebration that follows is a joyful social gathering with food and music, but the act of marriage itself is an earthly contract with profound spiritual consequences, handled with a sober clarity that mirrors their theology. This austerity reaches its most profound expression at the end of life. Druze funeral practices are among the most austere of any major religious tradition. When a member of the community passes away, the response is swift and simple. The body is washed and shrouded in plain white cloth, then buried in an unadorned grave, often within a day. There is no public viewing, no ornate casket, and absolutely no grave markers that might encourage veneration of the dead. This starkness is a direct reflection of their belief in immediate reincarnation, or takamas. Since the soul is understood to have already departed and been reborn into a new Druze infant, elaborate mourning over the physical vessel is seen as unnecessary, even misguided. The body is a shell that has been vacated in an instant. The community gathers to offer condolences to the family, but the focus is on supporting the living, not lamenting the departed. For the initiated Uqqal, however, there is a deeper layer. In the privacy of the mourning home or the khalwa, passages from the secret Epistles of Wisdom may be read aloud. These readings are not prayers for the dead, but meditations on the nature of the soul, its journey, and the divine unity it seeks to rejoin. They serve to comfort the living with the reminder of the eternal cycle, reinforcing the knowledge that the deceased is not gone, but has already begun a new chapter in a different form. The contrast with their neighbors could not be sharper. In regions surrounded by faiths with elaborate funeral rites, like the emotional lamentations and memorial masses of Christianity, or the prescribed prayer rituals of Islam, the Druze practice stands out for its quiet, almost hurried solemnity. Where others build monuments, the Druze plant a tree or leave the earth flat. This is the ultimate expression of their worldview, where inner spiritual reality utterly outweighs external display. The soul's journey is the only true ceremony, and it happens in a realm beyond human ritual. This unique covenant finds its roots in the tense years before Israel's founding. As Zionist pioneers sought to build a state in a land of many peoples, they encountered the Druze, a distinct community with a reputation for martial skill and a history of pragmatic alliances. In the late 1930s and 1940s, informal understandings began to crystallize. Key Druze leaders, reading the shifting political winds, chose to align with the emerging Jewish leadership, against the common backdrop of the British Mandate and rising pan-Arab nationalism. This was not an ideological union, but a strategic calculation, a continuation of the ancient Druze art of survival through timely partnership. The most symbolic moment came in 1947, when the spiritual leader of the Druze community, Sheikh Amin Tarif, reportedly made a formal pact with the Jewish leadership. This agreement, often referred to in solemn terms as a Brit Damim, or blood covenant, established a bond of mutual loyalty. In exchange for Druze support, the new state would grant the community full recognition and autonomy in its religious affairs. When the War of Independence erupted in 1948, many Druze fought alongside Jewish forces, a decision that cemented their place in the nascent country. By 1956, this relationship was formalized in law, with the Israeli government making military service mandatory for Druze men, just as it was for Jewish citizens. This was a profound gesture of inclusion, setting them apart from the country's Arab citizens, who were exempt from the draft. For the Druze, it transformed the ancient commandment of mutual protection into a national duty, a modern expression of their age-old communal solidarity, now directed toward the security of the state they had chosen as their protector. The reality of this integration is a tapestry of remarkable achievement and persistent tension. On one hand, the Druze in Israel are often hailed as a model minority. They serve with distinction in the military, with many rising to high ranks in elite units. They participate fully in political life, with representatives in the Knesset, Israel's parliament. They have their own independent religious courts, overseeing matters of marriage, divorce, and inheritance, preserving their autonomous spiritual identity. Villages like Daliyat al-Carmel and Isfiya flourish, with modern amenities and a strong sense of civic pride. To an outside observer, it appears a perfect synthesis, a community that has successfully traded military loyalty for cultural preservation within a Jewish state. Yet, beneath this surface lies a more complex and often painful narrative. Many Druze citizens voice a growing sense of grievance. They point to long-standing land disputes, where state policies have sometimes confiscated Druze-owned land for public projects or security zones, limiting the expansion of their villages. They highlight socioeconomic gaps, noting that Druze towns often receive less state funding for education and infrastructure compared to Jewish communities. The most profound tension, however, is existential. It is the strain between a hard-earned Israeli national identity and an enduring Arab cultural heritage. Druze are Israeli citizens who serve in the army, speak Hebrew, and contribute to society, yet their mother tongue is Arabic, their cultural references are Arab, and they share deep historical ties with Druze communities in Lebanon and Syria, countries officially at war with Israel. This creates a daily duality. A Druze soldier may defend the state against a threat from a country where his religious cousins live. A Druze family watches news of the broader Arab world with a sense of cultural kinship, even as their political allegiance lies firmly with Israel. This is not a contradiction they can easily resolve. It is a tightrope they walk every single day. Within the community itself, this tightrope has sparked a fierce and painful debate. The covenant of blood and service is no longer seen as an unbreakable bond by all. A growing number of Druze, particularly among the younger, educated generation, are asking difficult questions. They demand full equality, not just in duty, but in rights and resources. Protests have erupted over land issues and what activists call systemic discrimination. Some have even begun to challenge the very foundation of the relationship, the mandatory draft. Why, they ask, should we serve a state that treats our communities as second class? This movement does not seek to abandon Israel, but to redefine the partnership on more equitable terms. It represents a bold departure from the traditional leadership's strategy of quiet diplomacy and unwavering loyalty. On the other side stand the traditionalists and many veterans for whom the covenant is sacred. They see military service as a cornerstone of honor, a sacred trust with the state that has protected their unique faith. They argue that integration, however imperfect, is far safer than the alternative of alienation. For them, the protests risk shattering a decades-old understanding that has guaranteed their safety in a volatile region. This internal rift cuts to the heart of Druze identity. It forces a confrontation between the ancient imperative of communal survival, achieved through a pact with power, and the modern desire for individual dignity and full civic justice. Can the blood covenant evolve, or is the price of preservation a permanent acceptance of a secondary status? The answer to this question is being written not in policy papers, but in the lives of every Druze family in Israel, as they balance their uniform in the closet with their heritage in their heart, guarding an eternal secret in a very contemporary state. The landscape itself holds their secrets. To understand the Druze, you must look at the places they hold sacred, not grand cathedrals, but sites woven into the very hills and history of the region. The most revered of all is the shrine of Nebi Shaib, nestled in the lower Galilee of Israel. This is the believed burial place of the prophet Jethro, known in Arabic as Shaib, the father-in-law of Moses. In Druze tradition, Jethro is not just a biblical figure. He is a central prophet, a revealer of divine law who holds a special place in their lineage of messengers. His shrine is therefore the spiritual heart of the faith, a focal point for the entire global community. The structure itself is modest, a domed building typical of the area, but its significance is monumental. Once a year, usually in late April, this quiet site erupts into a vibrant, living tapestry during the Ziyarat Nebi Shaib, the annual pilgrimage. Tens of thousands of Druze from Israel, Lebanon, Syria, and the diaspora gather here. It is a breathtaking sight, one of the few times the community's size and unity are displayed so publicly. The air fills with the scent of grilled meat and herbs, the sound of traditional music, and the vibrant colors of ceremonial dress. But this is far more than a festival. It is a profound act of collective identity. Families reunite, elders bless the young, and the entire community reaffirms its connection to its prophetic heritage and to each other. The pilgrimage is a powerful paradox, a public celebration that reinforces a private faith, drawing the scattered global family back to its most sacred geographical anchor. High places have always been their refuge, and another mountain carries deep symbolic weight. Mount Carmel, overlooking the Mediterranean coast, is considered an especially holy site. Druze tradition holds that it was from this summit that the prophet Elijah confronted the prophets of Baal, a story of faith triumphing over falsehood that resonates deeply with their own self-conception as guardians of a hidden truth. It is no coincidence that many khalwas, their secluded houses of worship, are built on the slopes of Mount Carmel and other high elevations. The placement is intentional, a fusion of spiritual symbolism and practical necessity. Building on a mountain requires effort and commitment, separating the sacred space from the distractions of daily life in the villages below. The climb itself becomes a metaphor, a physical act mirroring the spiritual ascent required of the initiated. The view from above reinforces their theological perspective, a reminder of the transcendent reality they seek, looking down upon the temporal world. These high places are not chosen for grandeur, but for seclusion and perspective, creating a natural barrier that protects the intimacy of their most private gatherings. The architecture of these khalwas perfectly reflects the Druze ethos. You will find no minarets, no stained glass, no ornate carvings or golden domes. A khalwa is typically a plain, rectangular stone building, functional and austere. Its walls are thick, its windows small. From the outside, it might be mistaken for a large storage barn or a communal meeting house. This deliberate simplicity is a direct architectural expression of their core principles. Ostentation is seen as a distraction, a focus on the outer shell that detracts from the inner truth. The lack of religious symbols on the exterior is a form of built-in taqiyya, allowing the structure to blend into its surroundings without drawing unwanted attention. The real sanctity is reserved for the interior space and the minds within it. Inside, the focus is on creating an environment conducive to contemplation and study. The main hall is often an open room with simple mats or cushions arranged in a circle on the floor. This circular seating is crucial, eliminating hierarchy and emphasizing that all members of the Uqqal are equal before the wisdom they study. The only notable furnishing is often the kiswan, the locked cabinet or alcove where the handwritten epistles of wisdom are stored. Even this is usually plain, a simple wooden cupboard. The architecture serves one purpose: to remove all external distraction so that the community can focus entirely on the inner journey, on the silent conversation between the soul and the divine. In a world where sacred spaces often reach for the heavens, the Druze Khalwa turns inward, its plain stone walls holding a universe of mystical thought, proving that the most powerful temples are not those that impress the eye, but those that protect the mystery within. Yet this unique system did not emerge from a vacuum. The profound ideas held within the Druze Epistles of Wisdom speak a language borrowed from some of history's most sophisticated mystical philosophies. To understand their theology is to trace a river back to its ancient sources, primarily two powerful intellectual currents, Neoplatonism and Gnosticism. The influence of Neoplatonism, the philosophical system developed by thinkers like Plotinus, is unmistakable and forms the very architecture of Druze cosmology. At the heart of Neoplatonism is the concept of the One, an utterly transcendent, unknowable source from which all existence emanates or flows forth in a series of descending stages. This is not a creation in the traditional sense, but a necessary overflowing of divine reality. The Druze concept of Tawhid, the absolute oneness of God, mirrors this perfectly. Their God is beyond all attributes, beyond all human thought, the silent, infinite source, and just as in Neoplatonism, where the divine mind and the world soul are the first emanations, the Druze speak of their five cosmic principles, the universal mind and universal soul being the foremost. These are the bridges between the unknowable divine and the created order, the means by which the one interacts with the many without ever being diminished or divided. It is a philosophical framework that allows for a dynamic universe while preserving the absolute purity and unity of God. Intertwined with this is the powerful pull of Gnostic thought. Gnosticism, in its many ancient forms, taught that salvation comes not through faith or works alone, but through gnosis, a secret, intuitive knowledge of divine reality. This knowledge is typically reserved for a spiritual elite who can perceive the truth hidden beneath the surface of the material world and conventional religion. The parallels here are striking. The Druze division between the Uqqal, the knowing, and the Juhal, the ignorant, is a classic Gnostic structure. The secret epistles of wisdom are the ultimate Gnostic texts, containing the hidden interpretations that unlock the true meaning of existence. Furthermore, the Gnostic view of the material world as a flawed, lower realm, often the creation of a lesser divine being, finds a subtle echo in Druze thought. While they do not reject the world as evil, they certainly see it as a veil, a dense layer that obscures the brilliant light of divine unity. Spiritual liberation, then, comes from piercing that veil through knowledge, through the gnosis granted to the initiated, allowing the soul to recognize its true origin and destiny in the One. These philosophical streams did not flow directly from ancient Greece into the Druze mind. They were channeled through a much closer and more immediate source, the rich esoteric traditions of early Islam, specifically Ismailism. The Fatimid Caliphate, where the Druze faith was born, was an Ismaili Shia state. Ismaili thought itself was deeply Neoplatonic, having absorbed and Islamicized these Greek ideas centuries earlier. Ismaili theologians spoke of a cosmic hierarchy, of a hidden inner meaning, batin, behind every outer revelation, zahir. They believed in a living imam who possessed this secret knowledge and guided the faithful. The early Druze leaders were steeped in this intellectual environment. Hamza ibn Ali and his companions took the Ismaili framework and pushed it to a revolutionary conclusion. They radicalized the concept of the imam, seeing in al-Hakim not just a guide, but the full manifestation of the universal mind. They took the idea of a closed inner circle and made it permanent, sealing the community. In essence, they synthesized the Neoplatonic structure of emanation, the Gnostic pursuit of elite secret knowledge, and the Ismaili system of esoteric interpretation into something entirely new. The result is a coherent, self-contained system that views all of reality through a single lens, the journey of the soul back to its source. The material world is the arena for this journey, a school for the soul cycling through reincarnation. Conventional religious practices and laws are the outer shell, necessary for social order, but insufficient for true liberation. That liberation comes only from the inner knowledge of divine unity, a knowledge that reveals the cosmos not as a random creation, but as a purposeful emanation from the One, and the human soul as a spark of that divine intellect trapped in a cycle of rebirth until it awakens. This synthesis explains the profound inwardness of the Druze path, their secluded khalwas, their secret texts, their silent meditation, are all practical expressions of a philosophy that turns the soul away from the distractions of the veil and toward the brilliant, unifying light of its origin. They built not just a religion, but a complete philosophical universe, one designed to protect its inhabitants from spiritual ignorance by wrapping them in layers of sacred mystery, a living testament to the enduring power of ancient ideas reborn in a hidden faith. The ancient walls of secrecy now face a pressure more pervasive than any empire. For the Druze, the 21st century brings a silent siege not of armies, but of ideas, where the greatest threat is not persecution but indifference. This is the challenge of secularism, a global tide that questions the very foundations of religious identity. Within the diaspora, especially, young Druze grow up in societies where faith is often a private choice, not a communal destiny. They are educated in secular schools, form friendships across every background, and absorb values of individual autonomy, the inherited identity, the one passed down through a mother's stories, and the unspoken rules of the community, can feel like a weight from another time. Why adhere to strict dietary customs or endogamy when your peers celebrate personal freedom? Why guard a secret you were never fully told? This generational drift creates a quiet crisis of continuity. The strength of the Druze has always been their collective unity, but secularism champions the individual above the group. When a young person's primary framework for truth comes from science, media, and personal experience, the ancestral covenant can seem distant, even irrelevant. The community's response is not condemnation, but a renewed emphasis on cultural connection. Druze associations in the West work tirelessly to create a positive, attractive identity. They organize heritage trips to the Levant, host vibrant cultural festivals full of music and food, and run youth leadership programs. The goal is to make the Druze identity a source of pride and belonging, so that the ancient faith is carried forward not just out of duty, but out of love. They are fighting not with rules, but with roots, hoping to anchor the next generation in a rich soil of tradition, so they can weather the winds of a secular age. No rule is more absolute or carries heavier consequences than the prohibition against intermarriage. In the Druze universe, marriage is far more than a personal union. It is the sacred mechanism that perpetuates the closed cycle of souls. To marry outside the faith is not simply a breach of custom. It is a spiritual rupture. The community believes that the soul of a Druze can only reincarnate within a Druze body. If a Druze man or woman has children with a non-Druze partner, those children are not considered Druze. They are outside the cycle. The soul lineage, maintained for 1,000 years, is broken in that branch. The social repercussions are severe and immediate. The individual who chooses intermarriage is often considered to have voluntarily left the community. They may be excluded from family gatherings. Their name might no longer be mentioned in certain circles, and in the most traditional settings, they could be treated as if they have passed away, a practice known as social death. This is not done out of cruelty, but out of a devastating theological logic. The community sees itself as an eternal organism, and intermarriage is a cancer, a direct threat to its very cellular continuity. To protect the whole, the affected cell must be isolated. This creates heartbreaking personal dilemmas, especially for young people in the diaspora who fall in love outside the faith. They are forced to choose between their heart and their heritage, between a personal future and a 1,000-year-old past. Families are torn apart by this ultimatum. The community's stance, however, remains unwavering, for they see no middle ground. To allow intermarriage would be to dissolve the boundaries that have preserved their unique soul ecology. It would mean the end of their distinct spiritual nation, so they hold the line, even as it causes profound pain, believing the survival of the mystery is worth the sacrifice of the few who stray from the path. Then comes the digital deluge, a challenge unlike any other. For centuries, the Druze protected their secrets by controlling physical access. The Epistles of Wisdom were handwritten copies kept in locked cabinets, read only by initiated elders in secluded rooms. The internet shatters that control. In an age where every manuscript seems destined for a digital scan, how do you guard a text that must never see the light of a screen? Rumors and reports have swirled for years that pages, even entire sections, of the Rasail al-Hikmah have been photographed and leaked onto the dark corners of the web. If true, this is a catastrophe for a faith built on graduated revelation, their deepest theology, meant only for the eyes and minds of the prepared Uqqal, could be stumbled upon by a curious teenager with a search engine. The potential for distortion is immense. Without the proper context, the living oral tradition, and the guidance of a sheikh, these texts are mere words, easily misunderstood or mocked. The community's response is a masterclass in digital age taqiyya, a strategy of silent correction and reinforced internal loyalty. They do not engage in public debates about the leaked material. They do not confirm or deny its authenticity online. Instead, they double down on the living transmission. The value of the epistles, they teach the young, is not in the ink on the page, but in the wisdom of the elder who explains them. A scanned page is a dead letter, but the Thursday night gathering in the Khalwa is a living conversation with the divine. They emphasize that true knowledge is not information, it is transformation, and that cannot be downloaded. It must be earned through a life of ethical conduct and communal service. Furthermore, they actively cultivate a strong, positive online presence for Druze culture, history, and solidarity, flooding the digital space with the acceptable, exoteric face of their identity. This drowns out the esoteric leaks with a wave of shared heritage. The secret, they understand, is safest when the public story is compelling enough. The internet cannot steal what is carried in the heart and taught in trust. So while the digital world threatens to expose their scriptures, the Druze respond by making their community itself the only true key, ensuring the mystery remains secure not in a book, but in the bond between teacher and student, and in the silent understanding that some truths are too sacred for a screen. Against the backdrop of silent faith, public figures of immense stature have stepped forward to command history's stage. The Druze tradition of producing formidable secular leaders, while keeping the core of their religion utterly separate, is exemplified by two legendary names. The first is Fakhr al-Din II, a name that still echoes through the cedar-covered mountains of Lebanon. In the early 17th century, this Druze emir performed a staggering political feat. He unified the fractious regions of Mount Lebanon, creating a virtually independent state under his rule during the long twilight of the Ottoman Empire. But his vision stretched far beyond local power. Fakhr al-Din was a ruler ahead of his time, a Renaissance prince in an Ottoman world. He actively fostered deep ties with the Italian city-states, especially the Medici in Tuscany. He sent Druze youth to Italy to study art, medicine, and modern engineering. He invited Italian architects and agricultural experts to Lebanon, transforming the landscape with new irrigation systems and introducing crops like silk and citrus that would define the region's economy for centuries. Under his rule, the Druze mountain stronghold became a cosmopolitan crossroads, a place where European merchants, diplomats, and thinkers mingled with local scholars. This was not merely diplomacy, it was a conscious project of modernization. Fakhr al-Din understood that for his small community to thrive, it needed to be indispensable, connected, and technologically advanced. He expanded Druze political power not through religious zeal, but through shrewd statecraft and a bold embrace of the wider world. He proved that a community defined by spiritual secrecy could nevertheless produce a leader of dazzling worldly ambition and vision, a leader who could negotiate as an equal with European dukes, while the Thursday night gatherings in the hidden khalwas continued, undisturbed, as they always had. Centuries later, as empires crumbled, a different kind of leader emerged, one forged not in courts but in rebellion. Sultan al-Atrash stands as a colossal figure in modern Syrian history and a paramount symbol of Druze martial pride. In the 1920s, following the First World War, the French Empire carved out a mandate over Syria, imposing colonial rule. The Druze of the Hauran Plateau, fiercely independent for 1,000 years, chafed under foreign control. Sultan al-Atrash, the son of a respected Druze chieftain, became the spark and the soul of the Great Syrian Revolt, which erupted in 1925. He was not just a local leader, he became the overall commander of a nationalist uprising that united Druze, Sunnis, and Christians in a common fight for independence. His leadership was legendary. He won stunning early victories against better-equipped French forces, employing classic mountain guerrilla tactics that his people had perfected over generations. The image of Sultan al-Atrash on horseback, leading charges and inspiring his fighters, became an icon of Arab resistance. For the Druze, he embodied their ancient virtues, courage, unwavering loyalty to the homeland, and an indomitable will to remain free. He was a secular national hero first. His Druze identity was the source of his strength and his troops, but the revolt's banner was one of Syrian liberty, not religious doctrine. Even after the revolt was brutally suppressed and he was forced into exile, his legacy was unbreakable. He returned a hero after Syria gained independence, and to this day, in Druze homes and in the national memory of Syria, he is the Sultan, a testament to the community's capacity to produce leadership that transcends its own boundaries and inspires a nation. These two men, separated by 300 years, bookend a crucial truth about the Druze. Fakhr al-Din II navigated the complex game of empire and globalization to secure a space for his people to prosper. Sultan al-Atrash drew a line in the sand and fought to defend that space from a new form of domination. One was a builder and a diplomat, the other a warrior and a symbol. Both operated masterfully in the secular, political realm, leveraging Druze cohesion and martial skill to achieve grand objectives, while the secret heart of their faith, the divine unity and the cycle of souls, remained untouched, guarded by the Uqqal in the seclusion of the Khalwa. This is the Druze duality perfected, the ability to compartmentalize identity so completely that a community can simultaneously nurture a hidden mystical tradition and produce leaders who shape the destiny of nations. This eternal duality now faces its ultimate test in a world without borders. The strategy of hidden endurance, perfected over 1,000 years, was designed for a planet of isolated villages and slow-moving empires. Today, that planet is a digital village, buzzing with instant connection and relentless curiosity. The walls of secrecy, built from stone and silence, must now withstand the invisible pressure of satellite signals and social media algorithms. Can a faith founded on the principle of a closed revelation survive the age of the open internet? The community's ancient tools, taqiyya and strict endogamy, are being strained in ways their founders could never have envisioned. A young Druze professional in London or Toronto lives a life of integrated plurality, their daily reality a stark contrast to the secluded mountain ethos encoded in their tradition. The very concept of a spiritual elite guarding handwritten texts can seem an artifact from another millennium to a generation that believes all information should be free. Yet, the core strength of the Druze has always been pragmatic adaptation. We may already be seeing the early contours of a new kind of preservation, one that uses the tools of globalization to reinforce the old boundaries. Online networks now connect the global diaspora, not to discuss the Epistles of Wisdom, but to arrange marriages between suitable Druze families across continents, ensuring the continuity of the soul cycle with digital efficiency. Cultural content flourishes on platforms like YouTube and Instagram, celebrating Druze heritage, food, and history, actively crafting a proud and public identity that satisfies external curiosity while safely diverting attention from the sacred core. This is taqiyya for the 21st century, building a compelling digital facade so vibrant that few bother to look for the door to the inner room. But within that inner room, whispers of change are growing audible. For the first time in centuries, there are nascent movements and quiet debates challenging the absolute authority of the traditional religious leadership. Some voices, often from the educated diaspora, call for a measured evolution. They argue for greater transparency in how community affairs are managed, questioning the concentration of power among a few sheikhs. Others push for a more inclusive interpretation of who can access spiritual knowledge, suggesting that in an era of universal education, the line between Uqqal and Juhal could be less rigid. The most radical, though still marginal, ideas question the permanence of the closed door itself, pondering whether the prohibition on conversion is a timeless theological truth or a historical survival strategy that has outlived its purpose. These are not yet revolutions. They are murmurs in the majlis, but they signify a crucial shift. The pressure is no longer just from the outside world. It is now emerging from within, from generations who honor their heritage but live in a mindset of openness and choice. The community's response to this internal pressure will be far more defining than its response to any external threat. Will the sheikhs double down on tradition, enforcing stricter boundaries, or will they find a way to guide a controlled evolution, perhaps by expanding the circle of the Uqqal or creating new, authorized forms of religious education for the young? The future of the mystery may depend on a conversation between the guardians of the ancient texts and the children of the global age. Demography presents a silent, mathematical challenge that no amount of cultural pride can easily solve. A community that does not accept converts and relies solely on natural growth is inherently fragile, When combined with the devastating social enforcement of excommunication for intermarriage, the numbers become a pressing concern. In small diaspora communities, the pool of potential marriage partners is limited, leading some families to seek matches from the homeland, a practice that reinforces identity but also highlights the scarcity. Lower birth rates in developed nations, a reality for Druze families in the West, just as for their neighbors, further slow growth. Meanwhile, every individual who chooses a life partner outside the faith represents not just a personal departure, but a permanent subtraction from the eternal soul cycle as the Druze understand it. This creates a slow but steady demographic erosion, a leaking of the very essence the community is built to preserve. Can a closed spiritual ecosystem remain viable in an open world? The community is acutely aware of this tension. The emphasis on cultural celebration and youth engagement is, in part, a demographic strategy, an attempt to make the Druze identity so fulfilling and attractive that the young will willingly choose endogamy. It is a race between cultural vitality and demographic entropy, a race where the finish line is the survival of a unique spiritual lineage. So we are left with the pivotal question: will the Druze faith continue its strategy of hidden endurance, or will it inevitably adapt? The answer likely lies not in a dramatic rupture, but in a subtle, profound synthesis. The core, the belief in Tawhid and the cycle of souls, is non-negotiable, the sacred flame around which everything else is built. That flame will continue to burn in the Khalwa, guarded by the Uqqal, but the walls around the flame may take on a new form. We may see the emergence of a more formalized, yet still secretive, religious education system to anchor the youth. We may witness a strategic, careful engagement with interfaith dialogue, not to share secrets, but to explain their right to have them, framing their secrecy as a vital form of religious diversity in a homogenizing world. The adaptation will be in the methods of preservation, not the substance of the faith. The Druze have survived by being a mirror, reflecting back whatever the dominant culture required while keeping their own image intact. In the global era, they may perfect this art, becoming masters of cultural presentation, using the very tools of connectivity to reinforce their boundaries. They will likely remain a people of dual citizenship, loyal citizens of their nations, and eternal citizens of a hidden spiritual kingdom. Their future, therefore, may look like a paradox, a community more visible to the world than ever before, yet one whose heart remains as secret and as guarded as it was on a mountaintop 1,000 years ago, proving that some mysteries are not solved by exposure, but deepened by time. Their story is a testament to endurance written in whispers and stone, from a sudden, revolutionary revelation in the glittering court of Cairo to a faith that sealed its own doors forever. The Druze carved a path entirely their own. They built a world within a world, safeguarding an esoteric cosmology of divine unity and soulful reincarnation behind an unbreakable code of communal loyalty. For 1,000 years, through crusades and empires, through the birth of nations and the dawn of a digital age, they have navigated existence with a masterful duality, presenting an adaptable face to the outside while guarding an immutable truth within. Their survival is not a historical accident, but the direct result of a conscious, collective choice to place the sanctity of the mystery above all else. In their unwavering commitment to secrecy, we see a profound counter-narrative to our modern age of relentless sharing. In a world that often equates value with visibility, the Druze remind us that some truths gain their power precisely by being concealed, nurtured in the quiet soil of a trusted circle rather than broadcast to the winds. Their story challenges our assumptions about faith and identity, showing how a community can thrive not by expanding, but by deepening, not by converting the world, but by perfecting its own understanding generation after generation. They stand as a living monument to the strength found in boundaries, to the resilience forged by absolute solidarity, and to the idea that the most potent spiritual force can be one that chooses to remain hidden, a quiet flame burning steadfastly through the centuries. In an era of overexposure, the enduring mystery of the Druze is a powerful reminder that not all doors are meant to be opened, and that some of history's most captivating stories are those told in silence. What other secretive traditions capture your imagination? Share your thoughts and questions in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the shadows of history, subscribe for more journeys into the world of esoteric